It's the show where Hawaii's newsmakers come to talk and to take your questions live. From the nation's capital to Honolulu Hale, from the state legislature to the fifth floor. We bring the experts to you and ask them what you want to know. Spotlight Hawaii with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalesuji on the digital platforms of the Honolulu Star-Advertiser.
This episode of Spotlight Hawaii is brought to you by Long's Drugs.
Aloha, good Monday morning to all of you watching here on the digital platforms of the Honolulu Star-Advertiser. I'm Yunji Denise, joined by Ryan Kalesuji. And Ryan, today we are heading, as our introduction there suggested, to the fifth floor.
That's right. We're going to bring in Governor Josh Green joining us this morning live from the Hawaii State Capitol. Good morning, Governor. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning. I'm glad to be back.
You know, there's a lot happening at the legislature, so we'll start there. We have a lot of topics we want to get to, but want to first begin with this green fee. This is something that you talked about on the campaign trail about putting a tax or a fee on visitors entering the state as a way to help offset some of the sustainability costs of overall tourism and to bring some more money into the state coffers. But there has been some negotiations, some pushback happening on the legality of that. Lawmakers are saying that instead of an overarching fee, that maybe a impact fee may be the route to go. What are your thoughts in the communications you're having with lawmakers about how this is going to be rolled out and how ultimately it's going to be implemented?
Well, my feeling is it's a win for us either way. From kind of a philosophical standpoint, it's the same thing, whether or not we collected $50 from individuals that, first step down into Hawaii. We're talking about age 16 and older. That would bring about $400 million a year to help us fight the climate concerns we have. Or if we do site-specific areas, it will be also very effective. As you saw, I've put in $100 million straight from our general funds into a climate impact, I guess you would call it a special fund. That's a general gesture to make sure everyone knows we're going to fight climate change. And then those monies would additionally pile on. If you go site-specific, you're going to generate a lot less resource, but it will be more straightforward. So I really respect what Senator Koji was talking about there. I'll be happy with either. I do think it is legal. There are ways to do it. We already charge, for instance, TAT, the transient accommodation tax, at hotels. And that brings in about $1 billion a year. It's a big part of our economy. It's really six of one, half dozen of another, if you look at it. Our Attorney General feels it's constitutional to do this. I think we should do things that are straightforward when we can. But by the end of the legislature, we're going to have dollars for the impact that travelers have on our climate, and that's the most important thing.
And what kind of, initiatives would you want this to support? Because I think we had Mufi Hanneman on here from HLTA, and his concern was that this money would just basically go back into the general fund and get spent on whatever the priorities are for the legislature in the moment. When we say climate-specific initiatives, what specifically would this money go toward?
Open spaces, loss of infrastructure due to climate change, when roads fall into the ocean, that kind of thing. And the reason it's so valuable is because when you put it into a special fund, you can bond off of that money. Having our Budget and Finance Director, Louis Saliveri, who's really terrific, work on this. So for every $10, you can bond $100. For example, let's say on the North Shore, we continue to see very large impacts on the road there, and we don't want to see a community cut off. We might need to get them healthcare. We need to certainly keep them connected to the rest of the state. We saw this on Kauai quite a lot when we've had large landslides. These are the kind of things that you might want to fund. Large projects that are the result of big storms, sea level rise, and so on. So we better do this. We're facing at least $28 billion of cost based on the projections of some of our economics experts in the coming years. And we don't want to have to try to go and raise people's taxes to do that and pay for that. Yet we have 9 million travelers plus that come here, and it would not curtail their desire to come to Hawaii. We know that because when they were going through COVID with us, they paid $130, $140 a test just to come to Hawaii, and they still came in droves. So we should do something like this, but if the legislature decides it's more straightforward to be site-specific, that's okay. The way I'm trying to govern is, number one, collegially, and I don't claim to have the best ideas on all issues at all. In fact, I take a lot of my ideas from people in the community when I'm on a walk, or they call me on my cell, or I'm walking downstairs with the legislature. So we want good ideas. And if an idea evolves from the green fee, in other words, $50 when you arrive, to site-specific fees that go into this fund, it'll work. The key is to take care of the environment.
I think there are some questions too about how practically it would be rolled out. If it is site specific, obviously that has already been proven at destinations such as Diamond Head. If it is one of the route that you were proposing initially upon arrival, who would be responsible for collecting this? How would that look? Would it be at the hotels like the TAT is done? Would it be through airlines? What would the logistical sense of collecting this fee look like?
Well, if we want to be sophisticated, which we should be, we should use geofencing and use high-tech programs that are, they tend to be kind of in the brains of our young generation, the millennials who have been doing this great work. You can do it. You could do it that way. There are a lot of ways, though. You could just basically implement it to be collected at hotels, Airbnbs, and rental car facilities too would be a way. But the point is, one way or another, we may have to walk before we run. You're not allowed to collect these fees directly at airports. That's one of the concerns that people have based on kind of interstate travel rules and so on. And also the airlines are loath to do it. But sooner or later, people are going to realize that we shouldn't do things the same old way. That's not worked. We don't have the resources right now like we should have already for climate change and its impacts. We have to change. And so we've turned the page. You heard me talk a lot about Juliao, which is a new beginning or a rebirth. The government is different now. It is going to be more nimble. We're going to be testing new ideas. You're going to see me do things like I did with the emergency proclamation on housing and homelessness, specifically homelessness first. We'll come to housing in March. These are things that are meant to take immediate action. And if you want change, don't expect me to do it like it was done the last 20 years. That's not why I got chosen.
I found it striking, actually, that you did sign that proclamation as part of your State of the State. I want to get into the specifics of the proclamation in a moment. But first, there was a lot of discussion with the last administration about the emergency proclamation powers, and some folks in the legislature and elsewhere feeling that the governor had kind of overreached his authority. You made a pretty bold gesture in doing that, right there. Why did you choose that moment to sign that proclamation, essentially asserting your authority as the governor and really letting everyone know that those emergency proclamation powers are important?
People say they want transparency. Here it is. We're talking in real time about these issues. I did that in front of the whole state. This way I didn't have to have 76 meetings. I just did it. And this has been an emergency for a long time. Let me be really clear too. The emergency proclamation I signed is really just meant to build Kauhale, to work on the tiny home villages, to take care of people who are really suffering. It's not meant to get around any rules for big housing projects. So I'm very mindful. Frankly, I'm an environmentalist, at heart, and we're not interested in hurting the environment or ever disrespecting our kupuna iwi. What we're here about is change for people who are hurting. And so I did that right in the moment. And you would note I got a standing ovation on that one. It's not because of my good looks. It's because we're trying to get something done here for people, and we are taking action. And one of the greatest concerns that people had over the last 8 years was they didn't get action in an expedited time frame, that it wasn't happening quickly enough while people were struggling. Well, that's going to be the opposite of the problem we have now. I'm probably going to push forward much more aggressively than people are used to. I'm going to share these ideas. I'm happy to communicate, nonstop about them, but in broad daylight, I wanted people to see action. We also did things like we released the $50 million of grants and aid that had languished for 6 months right away. And then I sent letters to everybody in the legislature if it was affecting their district or their people. So I want people to see action. We're not going to get it right every single time. I fully acknowledge that. But if I can get it right 4 out of 5 times and then have people nudge me right on the 5th time, we're going to have a lot of success for our people.
Something else that was mentioned in your State of the State was specifically addressing your nominees and those you have appointed to be directors of the various departments in which encompass the administration. You've asked for their support in approving your nominees. What has the conversation been like through this process? Are there any departments or any of your nominees that you are concerned may not make it through the Senate approval process?
Well, it seems like I would say 90% of the nominees are not controversial in any way. It's always that last 10% that, there's some fighting over or discussion about. These are very good people. Let me say this across the board. They were chosen by an independent committee. And then I was, given the recommendations and made a choice from a short list at the very end. That, I think, has surprised a lot of people, including some of the legislators, because these are not automatic insider picks. A lot of good people inside government, a lot of good people outside of government. But I felt to get some change in perspective, we had to bring in some new people and some new blood. So that's what's going on. What that means is they're not well known to the Senate leadership. And so it takes a little time. People that have, I guess, generated a little controversy. Dawn Chang, she is a terrific person. This is a Native Hawaiian woman leader who cares deeply about the environment. She's had controversy over some kupuna iwi that she worked on as a consultant on behalf of the church membership, who were Hawaiians mostly, I would add, and their kahu. No one is going to be in full agreement on every issue. That's impossible. But can you imagine shooting down a Native Hawaiian woman, and then I have to appoint someone who doesn't have concern the same way for Native Hawaiian issues? That would be sad. That would not be the best thing. So I don't take this personally. I just think we have to make good decisions for our team. Ikaika Anderson, a guy who's a dear friend of mine, who, he wears his heart on his sleeve like I do. Is Ikaika perfect? He's no less perfect than me, that's for sure. And he has also got a long track record. He served on the council. He served in the capacity where he actually was permitting and building things. He has a good knowledge of the issues. But sure, he's a little controversial because I'm sure people have tangled with him over the years and butted heads because he was another politician or a government person. But is he a good choice? Yes, he's a good choice because he has been around the issue so much, and we needed some fresh blood. All credit, by the way, to Tyler and Bill. I mean, they worked hard in DHHL, but we need to jumpstart things a little bit, and having some new blood there is good. So those are two names. There are other names, and I've already compromised in some cases when someone said, maybe that's not the right person for that position, and we found other places for them. But I'm bringing in new blood. What I would ask is this: give our team a chance. Look, 90+% of them, I'm sure, I think the Senate has already suggested they are fine with. That last bit of people where there's lobbyists and some special interests and so on that are having heartburn over them, I just say back down a little bit and let us do our job for a year or two. If people aren't working out in my administration, we'll find a new road for them. They will move on if they can't get the job done. But don't ask me to use the same people doing the same things and getting the same slow result.
I want to ask you about something that you unveiled recently, and this is the Green Affordability Plan. In your campaign, you campaigned largely on helping those who are struggling here in Hawaii by perhaps eliminating GET on food and medicine, that sort of broad-scale tax cut. Which one are you sort of pushing now? Does the Green Affordability Plan, and we can ask you to briefly explain what that is for folks who haven't been tracking it, would that sort of take the place now of this elimination of GET on food and medicine, and why the change?
Sure. So we've proposed both, just so everyone knows. We have a very large surplus right now. It's about $1.8 billion as we speak. It goes up to almost $3 billion, just under $3 billion by the end of next year if we don't give money back to the taxpayers, which we have to do. We also know that we have to take care of ALICE families. Those are people that are asset limited. These are the individuals that are living paycheck to paycheck. So getting rid of the general excise tax on food and medicine is easier for people to understand. So it's a good proposal. It would return about $400 million back to people. But the challenge with that is a third of that money is paid for by vacationers, by visitors. And I'm not really trying to give them any break from taxes. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just trying to say they should pay their fair share of taxes, even more, as you know, from the green fee perspective. Now, the best thing to do after diving deep into this is to, yes, look very carefully at the general excise tax on food and medicine, which we incorporated into our Green Affordability Plan, and to really reduce taxes on ALICE families. Now, what this means is, essentially, is everyone will get an extra paycheck per year. And people start, and I'll show you a graphic in a second, people in the ALICE family category start about $42,000 a year, and they go up to maybe $109,000, $110,000 for a family of four. They're paying a lot of rent, a ton of rent. They're paying mortgage sometimes. They're paying taxes. They're paying too much for just survival. They're paying too much for medicine and so on. So let me show you something. So here's what it kind of looks like, all right? So it might be difficult to see, but what I'm going to point out is this. People are very poor over here, under $41,000 a year, filing their taxes together. They're barely surviving. That's why they have to have so much support, rental subsidies, healthcare subsidies for Medicaid, and so on. When you hit about $41,000 or $42,000 a year, you're still suffering because Hawaii is so expensive. So what we do is we double the personal exemption, that's this. We increase the standard deduction from $5,000 to $10,000 for individuals. We increase child care tax credits right here. So that's a big deal all across the board. That could bring a ton of money back. And this gray is the food excise tax, which is giving a tax credit here. So we also finally give some low-income folks rental help. So this provides $312,700,000 in tax breaks directly to our people between essentially $41,000 and $129,000 earned a year for families. Even some people that make a little more still get some tax benefits, which we'll have to decide whether or not to do because we're doubling that personal exemption. The good thing about this is it all goes back into the economy immediately. First off, everyone has more money to pay for rent and their food. And it also does not benefit visitors. It benefits our local people. That's why we really like this plan, and I do prefer it. More than that, though, every single dollar for people that receive these tax breaks is going to go right back into small businesses. People are going to be buying food. They'll be helping with tuition. They will perhaps be able to finally afford a down payment on a home. I mean, this is the way to go. So I was really honored to hear Speaker Psyche talk about this. They'll probably incorporate a few of these different pieces, but what I'm asking for is a tax package, a reduced tax package of at least $300 million for our people. It should be in perpetuity, because if you look at our general economic state, if we don't do something, we're going to be sitting on a surplus that trends upwards of $10 billion in 6 years, which would be really wrong. Now, I'm going to set aside money for the rainy day fund and for climate impact, but we really should put money back into Alice families' lives. And that's, I would say, the signature thing I'll be working on this year, because that affects everyone, especially affects teachers and nurses and so on.
I want to ask you about those conversations that you're having with lawmakers about this plan. Have there been other suggestions or negotiations at this point about their willingness to adopt this plan? And also, if you can speak broadly about the relationship that you have, how often are you meeting with leadership in both the House and Senate, and how have the dynamics been in negotiating this and other of your administration's plans?
It's really good stuff. I mean, first off, yes, I meet with the Senate President and Speaker extremely regularly. We have a standing meeting every week. Of course, I have the same with my Lieutenant Governor, and I've been seeing legislators day in and day out. I hosted already the Freshman Caucus, and we're going to be together for a gathering, I believe, this Thursday evening, and then again Friday. I also went to every office in the Senate and not just wish people well, but ask them to consider some of these things. Now, the Speaker and the Senate President and their Budget and Finance Committee chairs, WHAM and Finance, they have to make up their final mind about exactly what to do. But just giving people checks back at the end of the year each year is not really a good approach, because, and I'm not saying they're going to recommend this, because it's unpredictable. You will never know year over year whether or not that's going to be there for you as a local person. So knowing what the tax structure is, knowing that your taxes are going to be a lot lower, it's at least $2,000 per family per year. And in some cases, it's like $8,000 to $10,000 for a single mom who's making 80 grand trying to take care of her kids. She'll see a lot more, or he would see a lot more as a single parent, to really help those families educate their people. So it's a much better approach. I think that they will take the pieces that are most straightforward. All of this is meant to be matched with the federal tax code. So when you go and get your taxes put together, it's pretty easy. It's 4 or 5 things that people would get comfortable with. We also will make sure that we have plenty of education for the tax filers so that they can do it. But whatever is simplest and affects the Alice families the best, that's what we should do.
We always like to bring in questions from the audience. We've got one here from Brian, who says, can we get the stadium built, return the Pro Bowl, Bruno Mars concert? I don't know if you can get us the Pro Bowl or Bruno Mars, but how are the stadium discussions going?
They're good. There's a bit of an impasse between the House and the Senate. The House favors using the $350 million straight and building it with the university. The Senate favors the entertainment district around in a private partnership. We'll come to a compromise and we'll build the stadium. By the end of the session, they will tell us what they're willing to compromise on. If there's no compromise, I will really only have one choice, and that's to use the money, the $350 million, directly to build the stadium. And then I'll use the private partnership or the PPP plan for the rest of the land, and that would help us build shops and housing and so on. So it's going to be a nuanced difference. People probably won't really know the difference because the stadium will go up, but it's a lot of money, $350 million, it seems like. But of course, stadiums and large structures cost a fortune these days. It's important for our people. I would love to see Bruno Mars back. I certainly love football, as you guys know. See, look there. But, you know, I'm willing to tolerate some Pro Bowlers from other teams, you know, for the good of Hawaii.
Well, we hope to see your Steelers as well as others, maybe other professional football players back here in the islands at some point. Want to also address something else that we've been discussing here on this show, and those are the hospitals on Hawaii Island. You know, Hilo Hospital asking for $50 million, Kona Community Hospital asking for $20 million. These are all for repairs and improvements. Kona officials are saying that they're at a point where this money is much needed in order for them to be able to maintain the services they provide. As someone who ultimately has worked in these hospitals, do you support this request by organizations that are requesting this money for healthcare, specifically for the Big Island?
I do, and not just Big Island, but let's start with Big Island. So in the initial budget that we submitted, we have asked for $50 million to expand the med-surg unit and the ICU over at Hilo. We saw the need because during COVID, we just needed more beds, and also it's difficult to transfer patients, especially when we had, you know, the tragedy with Hawaii Life Flight, which is, you know, basically resolved as a crisis, or even the storms that we had over the last 72 hours. It was too difficult to get the rotors up because the winds were so heavy. So we need to do that. So expanding Hilo, and then of course Kona, they've asked for $20 million because we have to provide oncology, for example. That's cancer care. I have a cousin that just was diagnosed with a terrible cancer. He lives on the mainland, but had he lived on one of our neighbor islands, he probably would not be able to get some of that care there. So we have to change that. There's also a big request from Maui Memorial. That's going to be an approval from me. We have to be smart about it, of course. There's another thing that we're doing, which is we're calling them the sustainability fees. They already exist. We've had that in place for a long time. What we do is the hospitals are allowed to, quote, tax themselves up to about 5.5%. It gets matched by the feds, and then all of the money comes back, their match and what they put into this kind of pool of money. This will bring an extra $100 million for the hospitals and the long-term care facilities. And I'm increasing Medicaid reimbursements, $30 million on the state side, which brings another like $38 million of federal money. That also is going to go to healthcare providers so that we can get people to stay in Hawaii and practice. And then the final thing on healthcare, just so people hear it and know about it, we've now once and for all got to address our healthcare provider shortage. And that means everything from like social workers through LPNs and advanced practice nurses, physicians, specialists, psychologists, everyone. So forgive me if I didn't mention you in that list if you're a healthcare person, but I've put $10 million in the first year. We've historically tapped out at $500,000 for these loan repayments or loan forgiveness scholarships. We go to $10 million the first year and $20 million in the second year. The return on investment is incredible because then we can actually attract providers to stay in the rural communities or to go work, in the distant parts of our state. Like I started as a doctor in Ka'u many years ago. This is the right way to go. I would never have been able to come to Hawaii if I hadn't had my loans forgiven. It just would not have happened. And maybe some of my political rivals right about now wish that had never happened. But I'll tell you that that was a great way to come and serve in Hawaii. And, they forgave my medical school debt, and that made it possible to be a family doctor in Ka'u. Impossible otherwise. And I took care of 8,000 people. And so this is an extension of that experience. We should be the health state, not just from the standpoint of being healthiest, which we are, with the noted exception of the health disparities we have for our Hawaiian brothers and sisters, but also we should have more access. It's not good enough just to have healthcare coverage through Medicaid, Medicare, or some of the private sector. You actually have to have doctors and nurses and providers, especially in mental health care. So I'm really keen on that. I'm going to make sure we rebuild the mental health care system. We're going to rebuild the social worker system so that they can help our homeless population as we build these kauhale. And I'm going to put money back into Alice families' pockets so that they can survive in Hawaii and hopefully bring their children back here to live amongst us. That's really what we're talking about. I know there's a lot of inside baseball. I could tell you wild stories. I'm happy to tell you the next time. We can talk all day and night about that kind of stuff, but just expect me to be very active. And I'm going to use our values to underpin those actions. If anyone has a problem with my values, they should say so. But it's really going to be based on our families. So please think about that when we're trying to get projects going. We are not going to undermine the environment. We're not going to undermine people's rights ever. In fact, we're going to lean heavily on equality and justice reform. But first things first, make sure people can actually survive in our state.
I'm interested, just on a personal note, how you and the family are settling in at Washington Place. And also over the weekend, I noticed that the First Lady has now ventured into the world of social media. You are well versed in that world. I'm wondering if there are any tips that you've given her or any advice, because we know that can be a relatively toxic space. She's on Instagram and Twitter and all the like. So first, how are you settling in? And second, how's the social media going for the First Lady?
Well, I'm damn sleepy, actually, but that's just because it is really a 7-day-a-week job. And I'm honored to do it. And Jamie is incredible. She is the greatest partner and support I could possibly imagine. She is full of advice, I can tell you that. Let me see if I can get you her Facebook and Instagram handle here in a second, because I'd love people to follow her also. I'm at GovJoshGreen. It's really amazing. People are so generous with us. The kids are, they're settling in and they're happy as can be, I think. But we're honored to serve. Now I get to actually make decisions for our state more rapidly. So Jamie's already got 1,762 followers, and it's First Lady of Hawaii is her handle. So please.
Are you telling her not to read the comments? Like, what are you telling her? Because it's not always friendly. We know that.
I actually did say exactly that. I glance at the comments because I like to know, but people should be kind. I think that we need to have some kind of standard on social media or otherwise. One person's always telling me, why are you in the pictures on your Facebook posts? Well, because it's my Facebook account, and so I don't know what to say, but we should be kind to one another. And frankly, if we are, then we can actually take ideas off of social media, off of Instagram, and incorporate them directly into policy for our people. Jamie is amazing. She's the first Hawaiian First Lady, I believe, and she's already making sure that we move toward having we want to have a Native Hawaiian center that is home to cultural events and home to be a place where people can actually celebrate the Hawaiian culture. We'll see that from her. She's focused already on making sure there's equity, not just justice equity because she's an attorney, but financial and social equity. And she's very good at these things. Jamie grew up in Kaneohe. She was very poor and she lost her mom. And then because she was a smart girl, she got all kinds of scholarships and ended up at Brown and law school here at Richardson. She is awesome. And so as she settles in with me and I settle in, I already had some familiarity as LG, you will see us really out there and walking together on the beach and talking to people and really trying to get input from people. We've had, I think, 8 gatherings already, I believe, over at Washington Place in like 50 days. And that's another way to get hundreds and hundreds of people to communicate with us, leaders from other countries. We had a party with the Australians and with the Japanese leadership. And I will tell you, they were somewhat different gatherings, but great nonetheless. And so it gives us a chance to reach out beyond our borders and get investment from other countries, but mostly focused on here, how we can get things better for our families here. And that's really where Jamie's heart is and where mine is too.
Well, unfortunately, we are all out of time, but we thank you, Governor Josh Green, for joining us this morning, give us an update on some of the things that you're working on. And we look forward to catching up again with you next month. We also have invited the First Lady to join us on this program as well. So we look forward to hearing from her directly about how she's settling into her new role as well. But thank you so much for joining us once again. We always appreciate it.
Thank you. It's our honor to serve.
Aloha.
Covered a lot of ground there, Ryan, and very interesting to hear from the governor about what his priorities are. We started the conversation talking about the green fee. Dan Nicasso wrote a lengthy article today in the Honolulu Star-Advertiser that we invite you to go take a look at, really uncovering how the legislature is weighing the different options on how to impose a green fee, whether it's site-specific or a blanket fee. It sounds there like the governor would prefer to have a blanket tax basically on everyone who lands from out of state here in Hawaii, but he might not be met with the support in the legislature. It might be site specific. Either way, he says there is going to be significant cash gathered to help offset some of the impacts of the visitors and the climate change issues that we're facing here in our state.
Yeah, you heard him say we have to walk before we run, saying that or giving way to the fact that there may be some room for negotiation and how this is implemented. But this was one of the pillars of his campaign and something that he advocated for, and he continues to work with lawmakers about. We heard him also talking about his relationship with the leadership in both the House and Senate, saying they meet regularly to discuss some of these issues. He's saying that he meets more probably with lawmakers more than any other governor has, and is really trying his best to ensure that this open communication is something that will help the state as a whole as they continue to navigate through some of these negotiations, which also include the GAP plan, or that that negotiation that's happening with yet another proposal by the Green administration, which would have eliminated the tax on food and medicine, but now looking to evolve into this new plan that he is trying to push forward.
Right. Either way, he says he supports tax relief for working families. So whether that is through the elimination of GET on food and medicine, which was meeting quite a bit of resistance from lawmakers, or going with his green affordability plan, which basically increases tax breaks for working families depending on your income level here in Hawaii. That what he said, you saw he brought out the chart there, really would make a significant difference, he's saying, for working families, and basically achieve the same objective as eliminating that GET on food and medicine. He also spoke about his cabinet nominees and those discussions that he is having behind the scenes to advocate for folks who may not be doing as well in the Senate hearings as he would like. He said about 90% of his nominees are doing quite well, but there are about 10% who are meeting some resistance. And he's saying, hey, let's give these guys a chance. Let my administration basically go forward and then judge, as opposed to hamstringing us before we've even begun.
Yeah, always great to catch up with the governor. If you've missed any portion of this conversation, there was a bunch of other topics that we discussed. We encourage you to go back and rewatch this or listen to it as a podcast as it becomes available later today. On Wednesday, we'll be switching gears and catching up with Honolulu prosecutor Steve Alm.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about with him as well, specifically when it comes to what's happening in Waikiki, what's happening in Chinatown with some of the law enforcement efforts there in coordination with HPD, the city, and of course his office, and some other legislative initiatives that he is pursuing. So it'll be always good to catch up with him. And we welcome you to come back here, right here, 10:30 Wednesday. We hope to see you then.
Aloha.
This episode of Spotlight Hawaii is brought to you by Long's Drugs.